How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. I am very happy to have you with me. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Just so you know, I have been made aware of an issue that there's some equipment or some such that's got to be replaced at my flagship station through which my show is routed. And if you suddenly think you're hearing something I said before, it might be that I got cut off and they had to go to a best of, and we will scramble and get it fixed as quickly as possible. They were able to give us a heads up that there may be a problem. We're prepared for it, but just want you to know you're not crazy if you're suddenly thinking wait a second, I heard this before. Yes. I want to talk about the NFL. Do you all know, I actually didn't know this. I did not know this until I started writing about this topic last night. Of the top 30 most watched things in American history on television, of the top 30 most watched shows in American history, number one is the moon landing, and it's sometimes not put on the list because it's considered a news story and not a program. But more Americans watched us land on the moon than anything else. The Apollo 11 landing on the moon was the most watched television event in global history, interestingly enough. Number two, Super Bowl. Number three, a Super Bowl. Number four, a Super Bowl. Number five, a Super Bowl. Number six, a Super Bowl. All the way down to 27. 27 of the top 30 news programs in American history were Super Bowls. So number one is the moon landing. Number 2 through 28 are Super Bowls. Number 29 is the final episode of the TV show MASH from the 70s into the 80s. And number 30 was the news announcement of the start of the Gulf War in 1991. Those are individual programs. Now, that's programming. So the nightly news combined programming for CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, and the like for the start of the Gulf War. 9/11 was more heavily watched than that, but the 9/11 programming was not considered a news show. It was considered a news event, and so it's categorized differently. So in the top 30 programs ever watched in America, 27 of them are NFL games. Super Bowls. If you go to 2023, 80 of the top 100 programs on television were NFL games. 2024, it was 82. 2022 was 80. In 2023, it was 82. In 2024, it was 85. Let me give you real perspective. On 2024, 85 of the top 100 programs on television were NFL games. 10 were college football games. And the other 5 were like the Oscars, the State of the Union, and a couple other sporting events. 85 of the top 100 things. Since 2011, I did not know this. You know, I have guys come over to my front porch on Sunday nights, and during football season on Sunday night, we are watching Sunday Night Football on NBC. Every Sunday, without fail, from the first game to the last of the season, we are watching Sunday Night Football. It is the number one most watched program on broadcast or streaming every week. More people watch Sunday Night Football on NBC during the week than any other program, live or streaming. It's impressive. It is now the shared language of America. It used to not be the case. Friends, for a long time, was the most watched program. Game of Thrones would creep up there. It was never the most watched program, but it was always in the top 5. Even though it was on a paid cable service, HBO, not everybody had it. Anybody could watch Friends. Anybody could watch the NFL. But a number of years ago, Colin Kaepernick and the left decided to insert politics into the NFL, the taking the knee stuff. Kaepernick, I mean, history shows objectively, the metrics show he was not as great a football player as people on the left insisted he was. The people on the left had to concoct some martyrdom history of Colin Kaepernick. He actually wasn't a fantastic football player, not as good as they claimed. He was certainly good. He's certainly better than me, but he wasn't great. And he started taking a knee, and the San Francisco 49ers let him go. He is very arrogant in his attempts to get back in the NFL. It was very stupid. He tried one time with the Falcons, and it was just, it wasn't great. A lot of people got mad at the NFL for the rubbing their nose in the politics. They wanted a distraction from life. They wanted a distraction from the politics of the day. They were tuning into the NFL to get that distraction, and here come the players taking knees. There was no escape from the politics of the day, and people on the left said, good, there shouldn't be. The NBA has declined in viewership, and the NBA, if you actually survey people who no longer watch the NBA, it's two things. One, the games aren't really competitive. It's a bunch of individuals trying to get 3 points. There's no team play. And two, the politics of it. People have tuned it out because of the politics and because there's really not a competition. It's not a game within the NBA anymore. It's a couple of really talented guys throwing 3-pointers. There's no real teamwork for the most part. That's actually why the Oklahoma-Indianapolis final in the NBA was a good thing, because those two teams were very much focused on teamwork instead of one or two guys. And there wasn't a whole lot of falling over on the court like they do in soccer and holding their ankle and screaming like they were in pain when they were perfectly fine, which is increasingly a trend in the NBA to be like soccer. Nobody watches soccer. Intentionally needling friends of mine who love soccer. Well, the NFL, let's just say these teams are their own worst enemy. The Major League Baseball pulling the All-Star game out of Atlanta a couple of years ago because Stacey Abrams told them to, provoked a backlash. The NBA refusing to condemn China because it gets so much money from China, provoked a backlash. The NFL taking a knee, provoked a backlash. The NFL recovered in large part because Americans do love them some football. And now they've introduced male cheerleaders. Now, here's something you should know. The very effeminate gay men who are cheerleading have been a thing since 2018. Now, there are male cheerleaders in college sports, and many of them are very masculine guys who get to put their hands on the backsides of girls they hold in the air, and they enjoy it, and they're not the hyper effeminate gay men that the NFL is displaying on social media right now, and others are displaying for a number of teams. But it's been around since 2018. The Rams started, Los Angeles Rams started it. I noticed I went to a Falcons game in Atlanta last year. Atlanta had a gay guy on the cheerleading team, if not two. But all of a sudden in the last week, the pot has been stirred online on the right about this. It's something that's been going on since 2018. It was a thing last year with several NFL teams, including the Falcons. You didn't hear about it. Here's what's going on. First, let me give you my hot take. This is my hot take, not my super serious take, but there's a point to be had here. I have seen a lot of Christian influencers on social media very upset about the gay men invading female spaces such as cheerleading in the NFL. These same Christian influencers have nothing to say about the hypersexualized cheerleaders juggling their boobs for the married men watching football. They got nothing to say on that. They're upset about the gay men getting into the space where the dressed up prostitute costumes of the cheerleaders are hypersexualized for the men to ogle over. And I think if you're a Christian social media influencer, you should be criticizing the gay male cheerleaders, but you should also be criticizing how sexualized cheerleading has become within the NFL to get the attention of the married men going to the games. But I find it very notable. Very few of them, if any of them, have wanted to point that out. The larger issue here is there is an effort to get you outraged this week about the NFL. My conspiracy theory is that it's funded by the left, that it all got all worked up about Sydney Sweeney, and they're like, we didn't get worked up about it. That was like three nuts on LinkedIn. No. Even MSNBC was publishing pieces condemning Sydney Sweeney in the jeans ad, and it's like, oh my gosh, we got to find some nuts on the right to get something worked up about. Let's get them worked up about NFL cheerleaders. Conspiracy. The more important issue, however, is that both sides are trying to divide us from the one thing left in a nation we have in common. Listen, it is no conspiracy that both people on the left and people on the right have been trying to take common culture away from us. And it's not just on the left. And if you think it's just on the left, you haven't been paying attention at all. Do I think the left has a lot to do with it? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I think there's a role to play on the right here? Yes. And look at this outrage about the NFL and the cheerleaders. I don't watch the NFL for the cheerleaders. You don't even really see the NFL cheerleaders except when they're fading to go to commercial on the broadcast. You simply don't see it. So being outraged about gay men cheerleading who you're never going to see on television, and if you're at the game, we'll need binoculars to see, that's on you. Being outraged is often a choice. Being outraged is most often a choice. And there are those on the left and those on the right who want you to be outraged because it makes them money if you're outraged and you tune in for more outrage. There are those on the left and the right who also want you divided from common culture. They do not like the idea of shared community in the United States. On the left or on the far right, they don't want shared community. They don't want shared communal conversations. And so you now have this active group of people on the right on social media trying to get you to stop watching football games so that you can be outraged about the gay men who are cheerleaders who you're never even going to see in the game. We have a week and a half until the NFL returns. We are less than 2 weeks away. In fact, preseason has already started, but preseason doesn't count because it's never any good. We have a week and a half until college football starts back. Nature is healing. Americans across the political spectrum, from the left to the right, will be watching. It's your choice to choose not to watch because you're outraged about something the NFL corporate suite did. It's your choice to be outraged about something some NFL player 5 years ago who no longer plays football did. It's your choice to not watch. I'm not going to tell you to watch. I don't care whether you watch or not. What I care about is that many of you are willing to be manipulated by the outrage machine so that you give up something that is a shared commonality among Americans because you'd rather give in to the outrage machine than say, you know what, I am making a choice not to be outraged about this. I'm making a choice to enjoy the football game. I don't care. I had a woman say, you seem pretty upside down, Eric. Maybe you should seek help or Jesus. I don't know that this person is real. I do not know that this person is real. What I know is that if you're that worked up about cheerleaders who you're not going to see on television, there's probably something wrong with you. I can't understand the people who want to be outraged about stuff like this. I couldn't understand the people who want to be outraged about Sydney Sweeney and her jeans campaign. And yet this is where we are in the United States of America, where the outrage machine tries to draw you in and keep you outraged about nonsense. It's your choice. And all I'm telling you is that when you choose to be outraged about stuff like this, it's going to be easier and easier to get you outraged about a bunch of other stuff that doesn't matter. And this doesn't really matter. We have very few shared things in our community as a nation anymore, football being one of them. And I think you should probably tune out the voices who insist that we should be divided on football too, as opposed to turning off the football game. Next Sunday night, without apologies, I'll be watching Sunday Night Football with my friends on the front porch, and I'll be talking about it on radio the next day because I will know that 150 million Americans, roughly, half the nation's population, will have tuned in as well to watch that football game because we are Americans. It's what we do. The outrage on social media, it's what the weirdos are increasingly doing. Don't be weird. My buddy Jared Yamamoto tells me that there's actually football this weekend in Dublin, Ireland, at 12 p.m. But is Iowa State really real? Do they have a real? I mean, last year it was Georgia Tech and FSU. That was a real football game. I'm gonna get hate mail for that. Okay, so technically, college football starts this weekend. Maybe I will watch it. Maybe, although I'm going to a Braves game. Alex Thompson is citing this from CBS News or from the New York Times. Listen to this. This is from the New York Times in coverage of Sherry Redstone deciding to settle the case with Donald Trump that he filed against him. The Redstones were worried that Mr. Trump's lawyers could cherry pick raw footage and internal communications and do more damage to CBS News' reputation than any settlement would. Ms. Redstone said CBS personnel had told her that in October 2023, when Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes interviewed Joe Biden, the president seemed drowsy and had to be prodded to answer. She and Tyler worried the CBS might be accused of editing the interview to conceal Mr. Biden's failings. This case was never as black and white as people assume, Ms. Redstone said. One person who witnessed the interview in person and another who recently reviewed the raw footage said the Redstones' concerns about the Biden interview were overblown. Mr. Biden gave some typically circuitous answers, but he never had to be prodded. They said, wait a second. So CBS sat on an interview with Joe Biden. They wouldn't release the raw footage of Joe Biden giving circuitous answers that some people led the owner of the network to believe had to be prodded and seemed drowsy. In other words, yet again, we have evidence of the media covering up for Joe Biden at the time. Yet again, we have evidence of a media cover-up of Joe Biden, and they settled the CBS case to try to keep all that from us. Now, I got to tell you about Swiss America. They are trying to help you protect your hard-earned money. If you want to reach out to them, they will give you a free copy of their report on the secret war on cash. It's a report they prepared that explains to you how to protect your hard-earned assets. Now, the report's completely free. What you do is you call or text 800-289-2646. The All-Out War on Cash includes digital forms of currency, and it's spreading. Read the Secret War on Cash report completely free. All you have to do is mention me when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK, or just text them my name, Eric, ERICK, to 800-289-2646, and they'll send you a link back. You can follow. Get the report from Swiss America completely free. 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. When we come back, I want to talk about the story that's floating out there. My suspicion is this is a trial balloon from someone in the Trump administration about some people in the Trump administration advocating socialist MAGA. We need to reject this. Hello, my friends. How are you? The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program today, do not forget, if you text Eric, ERICK, to 33777. You can get the live stream. You can get the show notes. You can get the social media links. Follow me around on Instagram and everywhere else online. We got the YouTube. We got you name it. We got it. Okay. I got to talk about something that I think might be a trial balloon. I hope it's a trial balloon, and it's one we need to pop. The Trump administration, on occasion, in the first administration and now this one, has occasionally floated ideas out through various channels, typically mainstream media channels. In fact, you should know, as a side note, one of the underlying grievances some conservative media outlets have is that the Trump administration gives way more exclusives about substantive news to mainstream outlets than conservative outlets. And this has been going on for a while. I've had people at the Daily Caller complain, the Daily Wire complain, Newsmax has complained. It's just that if there's a really, really big story, it's probably going to be released to the Wall Street Journal or to the New York Times or to CNN or the Washington Post before it gets to conservative outlets. And if you understand Donald Trump, you understand why he wants to be seen. He recognizes that far more Americans are going to get their news from people who rely on those outlets than from conservative outlets. He wants to be maximum exposure. What I also know has happened in the past is that they will occasionally trot out an idea and see how does this play with the base. And they'll do it the Wall Street Journal, they'll do it at the New York Times, people will react to it. There'll be a rejection by the base of the idea, and the Trump administration will come out and say, well, that's fake news. We're not doing that. I mean, a really good case in point is yesterday, the president himself suggested that perhaps the security guarantee for Ukraine could involve American soldiers. He didn't rule it out. Overnight, a lot of MAGA supporters were like, absolutely not. This is a bad idea. Today, the president went on Fox News and said, we're not going to commit any troops. There will be no American troops involved. It's not a bad way to do it. And then what you get to say is that, oh, that's fake news. That's not true. No one was ever thinking that. And the base is going to believe you. And you further discredited the outlets to which you leaked the news and solidified yourself. I'm hoping that's the case here. Last week, Bloomberg News reported that the Trump administration wants a 10% stake in Intel, a private American corporation. Then came the crime crackdown in Washington, D.C., and it got overshadowed. Then came talks with Vladimir Putin, and it got overshadowed. Then came the European leaders, and it got overshadowed. Well, late yesterday, in the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News circulated again. The Trump administration, in exchange for giving CHIPS Act funds to Intel, which legally Intel, if they build their chip line in the United States, is allowed to get, in exchange for giving it to them, the Trump administration wants 10% of Intel. That's socialism, you understand. That's socialism. The Tea Party came about in part because in 2008, General Motors filed for bankruptcy. And to bail out General Motors, the Bush administration decided to take 60.8% of General Motors. It was then ratified by Barack Obama, who General Motors died. The actual General Motors went away. A new company was set up and called it General Motors, but the General Motors after 2008's bankruptcy is a completely different company. It looks the same, has the same sort of logos, has many of the same cards, but when the Obama administration took control with 60.8% of the company, they started making mandates. That's when General Motors decided to explore electric vehicles. That's when General Motors decided to wipe out several different vehicle models and lines. That's when General Motors embraced DEI hiring policies. All those things came because the government owned part of GM, and the Tea Party movement as a result started. Between the bank bailouts and the GM bailout, conservatives were furious, recognizing this is big government. This is socialism. Socialism is when the government controls the economic output of the country. When the government takes a stake in private corporations, that is socialism. It's what happens in Europe. Communism is socialist economics with a communist political framework where there can only be one political party and everyone else must be silenced. But taking the means of production, while that's a key phrase within communist society, it's actually socialist economics. The Nazis controlled the means of production. The Soviets controlled the means of production. The Chinese controlled the means of production. The Chinese actually, for a number of years, experimented with capitalism. They allowed entrepreneurs to control their own means of production. They decided to try a amalgamated system of capitalist markets with communist political control. Here's the problem with capitalism for communists. Capitalism breeds freedom. In fact, This is not to promote ericforhillsdale.com, but if you go sign up for their class on capitalism, the capitalism class shows you how capitalism breaks down authoritarianism and breaks down totalitarian regimes. Why? Because if you are negotiating an arm's length transaction for the benefit of you and your family, it's you in control, not the government. And then in your arm's length transaction, you do something, it's called making a profit. And it's you who made the profit. It's not Uncle Sam. And so you begin to believe you should be able to do with the money you made, not the government. And therefore, your profit goes to you and your family's good, not the good of the country. And you do it to you, your neighbor does it to him, his neighbor does it to him, his neighbor does it to him, and pretty soon you've got a whole bunch of people making decisions for themselves that are in the best interest of their family. And in a capitalist society, that lifts all boats. In fact, capitalism has elevated more people out of poverty than any other economic system. Why? Because people left to their own devices to negotiate for the greater good of their family wind up benefiting their nation. It very much reminds me of the Jeremiah 29, seek the welfare of the community in which you live, because there you'll find your welfare. Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, sends a letter to the Jews in exile in Babylon from God saying, you're going to be there for 40 years, people. I'm leaving you in exile for 40 years. And here's what I'm telling you to do while you're there. Plant gardens, have children, get your children married, be invested in your local community, seek the welfare of your community, because there you'll find your welfare. If you do that in your community, you stop focusing on Washington, D.C., focus on your community. If you live in Washington, that's where you focus on Washington. But you focus on your local community. I focus on my local community. Everybody around me focuses on our local community. We will improve our local community. You do your local community with other people in your neighborhood, you'll have improved your local community. And as each community improves, it improves your state. As each state improves, it improves your nation. That's capitalism. You do what's best for your family. Your neighbor does what's best for his family. Suddenly, we've got two neighbors who are willing to compromise with each other in arm's length transactions to benefit both sides. It elevates both sides out of poverty, which elevates the community out of poverty, which elevates the state out of poverty, which elevates the nation out of poverty. But it's done by you in an arm's length transaction. It's not the government involved. When the government starts taking control of businesses, even a 10% stake gives the government enormous clout over a company. Most shareholders in companies don't own even 10% stakes. The government has the ability to then chart a course for that company. And what happens when the government starts getting control of companies? They start making decisions for the companies that are not in the best economic sense for the company, that is not in the best interest of the shareholders of the company, that is not in the best interest of the employees of the company, but is a political, not an economic decision, but a political decision done in the best interest of the political leadership. And then the political leadership eventually changes because there's no permanence in American politics. And suddenly Intel becomes like GM and they start going woke because the Democrats get elected at some point and they demand it with their share of the company. Now, I don't like the CHIPS Act extent that companies get government money to make decisions. But that money isn't supposed to come with these sorts of strings attached anyway. Now, the Trump administration is saying essentially, because Intel is on a rocky financial footing, among other things, they want a stake in the company. That literally is when Sohran Mamdani says that the people should seize the means of production. That's what this is, seizing the means of production. Now, if you're opposed to Democrats doing it, you should be opposed to Donald Trump doing it, because once Donald Trump does it, you can't stop the Democrats from doing the same thing. The government actually passed a law with the GM bailout. It was part of a legislative framework. This is not. This is fiat by a single individual. And I don't know that Donald Trump wants to do it. Again, here's my guess of what's happening is that there are people in the White House whispering in the president's ears that the government should take control of 10% of Intel, that the government should embrace MAGA-style socialism. And I suspect there are other people in the White House who are whispering in the president's ear saying it's a bad idea. And those people, I think, have gone to Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times now and CNBC and said, hey, this is what people in the Trump administration are considering, and we want it on the radar so MAGA can say it's a bad idea. And it is a bad idea. Again, If the government can shake down a corporation for a 10% interest in the corporation, you can't stop it when it's the Democrats doing it. And you know where this leads if the Democrats try it. And the Democrats have not tried it. I mentioned GM and Obama. That was George W. Bush, and it was an act of Congress. It wasn't an individual shakedown like this. Now, I think there are constitutional issues at play, too. I don't know that the government can do it, but I don't think the government should even try it. I don't think a Republican should be in a position to demand a stake in a company for the government. If you don't like socialism, you need to understand this is socialism. The government taking parts of companies for the government in exchange for funding to the companies, that's not only cronyism, it's socialism. And when that starts happening, if you do it with one, what's to stop you from the next one? What's to stop you from the next one? The only way to stop it is to stop it at the first one. And again, this is different from GM because that was an act of Congress. This is just the president saying he wants 10%. My hope is this is a trial balloon, and when enough people speak out and say this is a bad idea, the president will say, well, that Erickson, he just made it up. That's not true. This is fake news. And I will gladly, look, I'll take the attacks so long as it doesn't happen. But this fits the pattern of crazy initiatives coming from the White House where MAGA says, no, we don't want to be like the Democrats. We don't want this MAGA-style socialism. And the president says, I was never going to do that. That's fake news. I'm willing to put it on the radar, and I'm willing to take the slings and the arrows so that we don't go down the road of the right becoming socialist. You know what we should do to Intel? We should allow the creative destruction of the marketplace to take place. This was my grievance with George W. Bush. It was my problem with Republicans in Congress. It's been my problem with the Democrats, is that neither side is willing to allow the creative destruction of the marketplace to happen. You know what happens when you allow the creative destruction of the marketplace to happen? The David can slay Goliath. When you surround Goliath with government regulators and say, don't even come near him, Goliath has no incentive to improve. Goliath has no incentive to innovate. Goliath just lives off the federal dole. Intel's problem is that it stopped innovating. It got big, almost monopoly status. It had certain competitors. It wasn't a real monopoly, but it could behave like a monopoly. It never saw the future of battery-efficient chips like RISC chips, ARM chips. It never saw the future. And it failed to innovate, and now it's being punished by the markets, and we should allow the markets to punish Intel instead of having the government bail it out. It's not good to have the government involved. If you don't like Mamdani saying the people need the means of production, if you don't like the Democrats saying that the government should make financial decisions for companies, you should not want Donald Trump doing it, because if you allow this to start now, you can't stop the Democrats later from doing it. This is a precedent that does not need to be set. And to the extent this is a trial balloon floated from the White House, hoping that you and I announce loudly it's a bad idea, well, you need to speak up and say it's a bad idea. What's a good idea is you calling Vision Computer letting them build you a new computer. There are Intel chips out there and processors, and there are AMD chips out there now. What do you actually need in your computer? They've got the answer at Vision. They can get you great graphics processing units, GPUs for your computer. They get you a lot, and it's great. You go to visioncomputers.com or call them at 404-COMPUTE. If you build a computer with Vision, you get their tech support, world-class tech support, for free. If you just want their tech support, it's $199 a year per computer. If you're in the gig economy, you need somebody on call 24/7, 365 because you can't afford the downtime because you're a 1099 contractor. Well, Vision's who you want. They can save you money, keep you online. If you're a company, you have managed IT, they might be able to save you some money, and your employees have an actual human being to talk to instead of an IT ticket to file. You go to visioncomputers.com or you call them at 404-COMPUTE. If you call them at 404-COMPUTE and tell Vision Computers Eric sent you, they might be able to save you even more money. Greetings, conversationalists. The phone number 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, I don't know if you know this or not, but crime in 1 week has fallen measurably in Washington, D.C. In just 1 week, crime has collapsed in Washington, D.C. Now, the left told you it was already in decline. And you know what the left is doing? Well, they're making up the statistics. You mean like the D.C. police were making up the statistics and actually there was an entire lawsuit involved in it? The interesting thing as well is that the soldiers and extra police, they're not actually even going into the crime-ridden neighborhoods. They're staying around where the tourists are. They're staying on the mall. They're staying around the northwest part of the city where a lot of the tourist areas are. They're staying in the subway system, but people feel safe. More people are out and about. There was actually a sideways story. Interestingly enough, there was a story the other day in the Washington Post about how residents of Washington, D.C. are now canceling dinner reservations. They don't feel safe with the extra National Guard. So apparently they'd rather be mugged. But oddly enough, more people are showing up at restaurants in Washington because more people feel safe going out overall, even if the local progressives don't feel safe. Crime is down another 8%, but carjacking's down by about a third. Burglaries down over a third. It's a massive drop in crimes against people and crimes against property. I still think that the National Guard and police need a show of force in the southeast and northeast portions of D.C., which are the most crime-ridden. Go into the black neighborhoods, make the black moms and dads feel safe, stop the drive-by shootings and the gang wars, and have a measurable impact. I still think they should do that. But right now, they're just where the tourists are. And even where the tourists are and inside the subway system in D.C., it's having a measurable impact improving Washington, D.C. People feel safe. And even though the progressives have decided to stop going out because they don't feel safe having a bunch of white police officers present, the actual black residents of D.C. feel even more safe. Half of the crackdown arrests, by the way, have come from the high crime area. Even as the National Guard has been patrolling the mall, it actually looks to a degree that the local police are going into the southeast section. 48% of non-immigration related arrests during Trump's D.C. takeover have taken place in two of the most crime-heavy areas, Ward 7 and Ward 8, per a Washington or White House analysis. That's really good. Really good. People are seeing that actual aggressive law enforcement makes a real difference. And it is this weird thing where people on the left just expect that you should be harassed in a city. No American should feel unsafe anywhere in the United States. And that the left thinks you should is one of the reasons the left keeps losing. In fact, there's new polling out that shows Donald Trump may only have 40% popularity in the country, but the same poll shows Democrats have like 19% popularity in the country. There's a real big gap here, and it's not one working in the Democrats' favor. We got a whole lot more when we come back.